Cheryl, what is astrology and how does it affect people's lives?
Astrology is the study of how planets and celestial bodies affect man and affect what's going on here on Earth. Now, a lot of people talk about what we astrologers call popular astrology, in that they talk about sun signs, and so you'll hear people saying, I'm a Virgo, or I'm a Sagittarian, or I'm this or that or the other, and they're really only talking about the sun, where the sun was at the time that they were born. And that's important, but that's not all there is to astrology. So that when they look at the paper and people say, oh, it's so general, it has to be general if you only deal with the sun. But if a person really got a chart done, it would not only be important to know where the sun was at the time that they were born, but also where the other 9 planets are, what sign they're in, how do they relate to each other, and where do they fall on the chart. And this would be much more specific, and this is the reason why you need to know exactly what time a person was born.
How has astrology affected your life?
Oh, it's affected my life in that it's helped me to see more clearly what direction my life should be taking, and also it's helped me to understand the people around me better and to be able to relate to them more effectively. It's really helped me to understand what my role in life is supposed to be. I've always sort of had an interest in anything related to fortune telling, and when I was about 7, one of the Christmas gifts I got was a gift of a little box of fortune telling cards, which I still have with the directions, and so I can still use them. I always wanted to be a gypsy or a witch, just always very fascinated with that kind of thing. Then my favorite aunt was interested in astrology, and again she was interested in popular astrology, and she used to buy the little books on sun sign, and she had them on my grandmother and everybody else in the family who was close, and we used to read them and laugh about them. When I was about 3 or 4 years ago, a friend of mine who lives in Baltimore, she and I went to New York and had our charts done, and it was at the point that I had my chart done and saw where the inconsistencies around my sun sign could be explained through knowing more than just the sun sign that I became seriously interested in astrology.
How long does it take to become an astrologer? How much study does it take?
Well, it takes quite a bit of study. I wouldn't be able to put a specific time on it. I think it depends on a certain amount of maybe innate capability and your interest and how much time you have to put into it. For me, I became very interested in it and almost fanatical about it, and so I really stopped reading just about everything else and just read on my own very intently for about 3 months. Then I took 2 formal classes in astrology in Baltimore prior to coming to Tallahassee. When I came here, I really wanted to know how to calculate exactly, so I took private lessons for about 2.5 to 3 months and just went out and specifically zeroed in on how to calculate charts. And I've continued to read on my own since and attend astrology conferences and get professional magazines, just like anything else that you would study.
Are you a witch?
No, people ask me that all the time, and unfortunately I'm not.
Would you like to be?
Yes and no. I read civil legal. I've always been fascinated with that and have been interested in it. And I even had a book here that I got in some secondhand store called, I think it's called A Naked Witch, and it has a quiz in there, and it asks you all these questions, and they're supposed to tell whether or not you were a witch in another life. And while I met a lot of that criterion, I'm not a witch in this life. I read Sybil Leek's autobiography, and one reason why I don't think I would want to be one is because I don't have the mind control. There are good witches and bad witches, and unlike what most people think, they automatically think of witches as being something negative, but really witchcraft is the religion Wicca, which means the old religion. And people who are really into witchcraft develop certain kinds of powers that they can then use for good or evil. And if you use them for evil, the negative things that you do, the negative vibrations that you send out, will come back on you in some way in the end. And so if you are a witch, or if you're dealing with anything really where you're conjuring up spirits and trying to impact on other people, you have to be very careful to send out only positive vibrations. And Right now, I'm a little too vindictive for that. I think I'd go along fine, and then somebody really upset me, and I think before I think about it, I might have sent out some bad vibes. Plus, a psychic told me last year that in a past life I had had healing powers and I had misused them, and that it took me a long time to be able to come back because I'd misused them, and to be very careful not to do that in this life, and to stay away from witchcraft, seances, Ouija boards, and anything else that was involved with conjuring up spirits, which is why I don't own a Ouija board. But the temptation's there.
What was your past religious background?
Well, I was raised as a Catholic, and if you know anything about the Catholic Church at all, you know that it's forbidden to be interested or pursue anything around the occult or fortune-telling, although astrologists make note of the fact that the Vatican has the largest collection of astrology books of any other body in the world. Nevertheless, in spite of that, I sort of moved away from the Catholic Church in later years while I was in college, not just because of an interest in the occult, which I never saw any harm with, but also because it's just very restrictive anyway, and I feel that now I'm probably more spiritual in pursuing astrology and other aspects of the occult than when I was in the Catholic Church with all its thou shalts and thou shalt nots. It really discourages you from thinking, and I just couldn't reconcile it, with my own thinking. And I always told myself if I ever left the Catholic Church, I'd never join any other formal Orthodox religion because all of them have those restrictions. I thought about the Nation of Islam at one point about 5 years ago and decided not to join it for the same reasons, because it's too strict, it's too rigid, and I feel that I'm finding my own answers in spirituality.
What about the irrational element? Some people may think that astrology is really an irrational science and doesn't fit into the world of what is really real. How do you answer that charge?
Well, people ask me a lot, how can you be in social work and how can you have a master's degree and believe in astrology? And my answer to that is I'm really not concerned with those kinds of philosophical questions to some extent. And the reason why I believe in it is because I see it works. In the beginning, I was interested out of curiosity, and I read a lot of the sun sign books, and I started to just look at the people around me, and I noticed patterns of things just on the sun sign, that all my friends fell within a certain number of signs or a certain few signs over and over again, and I dated people under the same signs over and over again. And also the people that I disliked usually fell within certain signs. And I just started watching the patterns over the years. Now that I've gotten beyond the sun sign, I can really see where patterns just repeat themselves over and over again. And it has validity for me because it does work. If other people feel that that's irrational, I feel at this point it's their problem, and I don't waste my energy trying to defend it anymore.
And now we're doing the tarot cards, Cheryl. I wonder if you could tell us a little something about these cards. What is this pattern you're making?
Okay, there are different ways that you can lay out the tarot cards, and we call them spreads. And this particular one is called the Celtic Cross. And most tarot books that you get will tell you about the Celtic Cross. However, the way I read this one is somewhat modified based on an interpretation used by my card teacher, Carl Alcorn.
What is the origin of tarot cards?
Well, that's debatable. If you read about it in different books, you read different things. And the story that I like most is that the Egyptians, when they feared the invasion by the Romans and thought that their libraries would be burned, wanted to get the information down on paper and get it out. So they put it on 78 cards. And the cards, if you look at them, especially if you look at several different decks, have a lot of occult symbolism. And the story goes that these cards were then given to the gypsies who got them out of Egypt, and this is partly why the gypsies are associated with cards and fortune-telling.
How long have you been telling cards?
2.5 years.
How long does it take somebody to learn how to tell cards?
Well, again, that depends. There are 78 cards, and each card has a couple of meanings, at least 2 or 3 or 4 meanings. So however long it takes you to learn all of the meanings, the best way to learn it is to just practice, to just take the cards, and even if you have to look up all the cards in the book as you're reading, to just read as many people as you can, and then sooner or later, as you start reading them more and more and more, you start learning the meanings and remembering, and then you start developing your own interpretations on the cards, and you kind of have to go with the meaning that the book gives you and what it feels like for that particular person.
Well, these cards are not like an astrology chart, are they?
No, the cards deal with what's on your own subconscious mind. So unlike astrology, which can deal with a lot of objective kinds of things too, the cards really deal with what you're thinking yourself. And so it might not tell you anything you don't already know, but sometimes it helps you to crystallize an idea or a feeling that you have, but you can't quite bring it into focus. The other difference between the cards and the astrology is the cards are pretty much present-oriented. So unlike astrology that can go way back or way forward in the future, the cards deal with the immediate past, present, and near future.
Well, now these cards are one kind of deck. There are other kind of decks, aren't there?
Yes, they're all different kinds. Carl has about 30 or 40 decks at least, and this is only one, and then I have probably about 7 or 8 different decks.
Well, when did people discover that planets did have an influence on their lives?
Well, people have been watching the planets and their positions over centuries, thousands of years really. And if you look at ancient civilizations, all of them evolved some form of astrology. The Egyptians, the Mayans, the Aztecs, various Asians have observed the positions of the planets, and the way astrology comes about is they have observed what has happened to man as the planets were in certain positions. So it doesn't really explain why certain rays impact in a certain way, but that when Saturn is in a certain position, this is what usually will happen to a person, or these are the kinds of things one can expect to happen. The planets represent energies. The signs tell you how the energies are being manifested, and on the chart, the houses tell you what areas of activity these energies will be projected into.
And the energies of the planets have been established through tradition over and over again.
Right.
So you can feel fairly secure when you look at a person's birth date and you know where the planets are. You can feel fairly secure in your decisions about what is affecting that person's life.
Yes, you can.